What if everything you think you know about Tupac and Biggie is a lie? What if the most famous beef in hip-hop history wasn't built on hatred, but on misunderstanding, manipulation, and a dirty industry game played behind closed doors? For decades, they told us it was East Coast versus West Coast, New York versus LA, pride clashing with pride until bullets started flying. But according to 50 Cent, that story is capped. And once you hear this, you'll never look at Pac and Big the same again. Because this wasn't two enemies itching to kill each other. This started as brotherhood, real love, couch crashing, studio nights, blunt smoke, and game being passed down from one rising king to another. Tupac didn't just believe in Biggie, he built Biggie. Gave him the blueprint, the mindset, the strategy that would turn a hungry Brooklyn hustler into a global superstar. And Biggie respected Pac so much, he couldn't even bring himself to diss him when the whole world expected him to. So how did it all turn so ugly? How did a friendship that deep turn into paranoia, diss records, and eventually 2 funerals within 6 months? That's where the industry steps in. That's where greed, egos, and power moves changed hip-hop forever. A studio shooting that planted seeds of doubt. Record executives who saw dollar signs in conflict. Label heads who poured gasoline on a fire instead of putting it out. And a media machine that sold chaos like it was entertainment. 50 Cent says if Pac and Big really wanted each other dead, it wouldn't have played out on wax. It would have been handled in the streets, quick, silent, and final. But that's not what happened. What happened was worse. They were pushed into a war they didn't fully control, trapped in narratives they couldn't escape. This isn't just a beef story. This is a cautionary tale about loyalty, betrayal, and what happens when the industry decides your pain is profitable. Back before the headlines, before the police reports, before the diss records and funeral processions, this story didn't look like a war at all. It looked like opportunity. It looked like 2 young black men from opposite sides of the country finding each other in an industry that was still half street, half corporate hustle. In 1993, hip-hop wasn't the billion-dollar machine it is now. It was still dangerous, still raw, still personal. And that's the world Tupac Shakur was already winning in. Pac wasn't just rapping. He was acting, doing movies, selling records, moving like a star while still talking like someone who never forgot the block. Meanwhile, on the other side of the map, Christopher Wallace was still Biggie Smalls in the truest sense, overweight, underknown, and underground. Brooklyn knew him. The world didn't. Their meeting wasn't some polished label introduction with suits and contracts. It was street-connected, organic, the kind of introduction that only happened in that era. Mutual acquaintances. Street overlap. A world where hustlers, rappers, and industry insiders all ran in the same circles. And from the jump, Pac saw something in Big. Not competition. Not threat. Potential. Hunger. That raw presence you can't teach. Instead of treating him like just another rapper trying to come up, Pac embraced him. Let him crash at his place. Fed him. Smoked with him. Talked with him for hours about life, music, and survival in a business that chews people up and spits them out. This wasn't fake industry love. Multiple people around them saw it. Pac moved like a big brother, not a peer. He wasn't gatekeeping knowledge. He was handing it over freely. He told Big how to structure records, how to think about audiences, how to balance street credibility with mainstream success. One piece of advice alone would change hip-hop forever. Don't rap for dudes on the singles, rap for women. Save the gritty stuff for the album cuts. That wasn't selling out, that was chess. And Big listened. You can hear that influence all over Ready to Die. The smooth hooks. The radio-friendly joints that still hit the streets hard. That wasn't an accident. That was mentorship. Pac even considered managing Big at one point. Let that sink in. He wasn't just cheering from the sidelines. He was willing to put his own reputation and energy behind Big's career. But instead of keeping him close, Pac did something most people in this industry would never do. He told Big to stick with Puff. He saw the bigger picture. He knew Puff had the connections, the business instincts, the machine to turn Big into a superstar. That decision alone contradicts the idea that Pac secretly resented Big's rise. If anything, he helped engineer it. Their bond wasn't hidden. It was public. They freestyled together on stage at Madison Square Garden. Thousands of fans watched two future legends share the same mic like brothers. There was no tension, no competition, just chemistry. And behind the scenes, the respect ran deep. Big reportedly recorded diss lines aimed at Pac at one point but couldn't release them. Loyalty stopped him. Even years later, after Big was gone, those lines were muted. That doesn't come from hatred. That comes from conflict you don't want to exist. But here's the thing about brotherhood. When it breaks, it hurts worse than beef with a stranger. And the moment that fracture started didn't come from a song. It came from fear. November 30th, 1994. Quad Recording Studios. Tupac walks in expecting a normal studio session. Instead, he walks into a nightmare. Masked men. Guns. Robbery. 5 bullets tearing through his body. Jewelry ripped off him. Blood on the floor. Pain most people don't survive. And while he's being rushed out, half-conscious and furious, he sees Big and Puff in the building. Alive. Not bleeding. In Pac's mind, nothing else mattered after that moment. Was there proof Big set him up? No. None. But trauma doesn't care about logic. Trauma rewrites reality. Pac had always believed betrayal comes from the closest people, not enemies. And from his perspective, the timing felt impossible to ignore. Same building. Same night. Same industry. Then, hours later, instead of protection or support, Pac is arrested and dragged into a legal nightmare that lands him behind bars. Shot 5 times and still treated like the criminal. Alone. Isolated. Angry. Big visited him in jail. Tried to explain. Tried to clear his name. But by then, the seed was already planted. Doubt had roots. Every unanswered question became evidence in Pac's mind. Every silence felt like confirmation. Sitting in a cell gives you nothing but time to replay moments over and over. And while Pac was locked up, the industry kept moving. Labels kept selling. Media kept spinning narratives. Nobody slowed things down long enough to fix what was breaking. That's where 50 Cent's perspective starts to matter. Because 50 says Real Street beef doesn't play out like this. If Big and Pac truly wanted each other dead, there wouldn't have been interviews, subliminals, and months of tension. It would have ended fast. Quiet. Final. Instead, what we saw was something different. 2 men reacting emotionally while powerful people around them benefited from the chaos. Executives didn't rush to reconcile them. They watched ratings spike. Records sell. Headlines spread. When Pac finally got out, he wasn't free. He was recruited. Suge Knight posted bail and wrapped him in death row's identity. An identity already at war with Bad Boy. That personal hurt Pac carried now had a corporate megaphone behind it. Every insult got louder. Every misunderstanding got magnified. And Big, on the other side, stayed mostly silent. Focused on his album. His family. His lane. Silence that Pac interpreted as disrespect, but might have been restraint. What started as mentorship had now been reframed as rivalry. Not because the truth changed, but because perception did. And once perception hardens in hip-hop, especially in the 90s, backing down wasn't an option without losing everything. Respect. Credibility. Safety. The culture demanded escalation, and the industry rewarded it. That's how brothers became symbols. And symbols don't get to explain themselves. Once Tupac stepped out of that prison gate in late 1995, the damage was already done. Not publicly, not yet, but internally. Whatever trust he once had was fractured, and in hip-hop, fractures don't stay quiet for long. Pac didn't come home to peace. He came home to death row. Suge Knight didn't just bail him out, he wrapped him in a new identity, a new mission, and a new enemy. From that moment on, Pac wasn't just Tupac Shakur anymore. He was death row's frontline soldier in a war that was bigger than him. Suge understood something the industry had always known but rarely said out loud. Conflict sells. Nothing moves units like drama, and nothing fuels drama like emotion. Pac was emotional, brilliant, wounded, and fearless. The perfect storm. Suge already had tension with Bad Boy and Diddy, and now he had Pac's pain to weaponize. Every interview, every appearance, Every stage moment became louder. The infamous Source Awards moment didn't come out of nowhere. That was strategy mixed with ego, performed in front of cameras that were hungry for chaos. And the crowd felt it. You could feel the air change that night. Lines were drawn, sides were chosen, and the culture followed. From Pac's perspective, everything seemed connected. The shooting, the jail time, the silence he felt from people he once trusted. When Biggie released "Who Shot Ya?", even if it was recorded before the Quad incident, timing turned perception into reality. To Pac, it sounded like mockery, like salt in a wound that never healed. Context didn't matter anymore. Intent didn't matter. Emotion did. And Pac reacted the only way he felt the streets would allow him to react. Loud, direct, unforgiving. But here's the part people rarely slow down enough to examine. Biggie never matched that energy. Not really. He didn't go on interview tours dissing Pac. He didn't release a nuclear response. He stayed mostly quiet, focused on his work, on his family, on finishing life after death. And silence in hip-hop is dangerous because it gets interpreted however the listener wants. To Pac, silence felt like guilt. To Big, it may have been survival. 50 Cent points to this difference as proof that the beef wasn't what it looked like. He says real hatred doesn't simmer this long without exploding. It doesn't stay lyrical. It doesn't get filtered through record labels and press runs. Real street beef ends fast or ends in bodies. What we saw instead was escalation through media, through music, through symbols. That's not street logic. That's industry logic. Meanwhile, the media poured gasoline everywhere. Magazines framed it as East versus West like it was a sporting event. Radio hosts picked sides. Fans argued like they were part of the conflict. Nobody asked who was benefiting. The answer was obvious. Labels were printing money. Artists were selling records. Executives were watching numbers climb while tension turned deadly. And no one with real power stepped in to shut it down. Pac leaned fully into the war narrative. Hit 'Em Up wasn't just a diss record. It was an emotional eruption. Anger, betrayal, ego, and pain poured into every bar. It shocked the culture. It crossed lines. And once it dropped, there was no going back. From that moment on, peace became weakness in the eyes of the streets. Pac was locked into a role he didn't fully choose, but felt he had to play. Biggie, on the other hand, stayed conflicted. Friends around him said he didn't want it to go this far, that he still had love for Pac despite everything, that he felt trapped between loyalty to his camp and respect for someone who once showed him genuine brotherhood. This wasn't hate. This was unresolved hurt. And unresolved hurt doesn't disappear. It festers. Then came the paranoia. Pac felt hunted, watched, surrounded by enemies real and imagined. And the truth is, some threats were real. The streets don't forget. But when fear mixes with fame, everything feels amplified. Every look becomes suspicious. Every rumor feels confirmed. Pac moved like a man who believed death was circling him, and when someone believes that, they start moving differently. Recklessly. Loudly. Like they're daring fate to prove them right. 50 Cent has said this is where the real tragedy lies. Pac and Big weren't driving the situation anymore. They were reacting to it. Being pushed by forces bigger than them. Labels. Media. Street politics. Ego. Pride. All of it collided at once. And no one slowed the train down. Not friends. Not executives. Not fans. September 7th, 1996. Las Vegas. Mike Tyson fight. Chaos outside the MGM Grand. Pac jumps into a confrontation that had nothing to do with Biggie. Minutes later, he's riding through the city in a car everyone recognizes. Windows down. No armor. No protection. Easy target. The shots come fast. Pac survives for days, but the damage is too deep. Hip-hop loses one of its most powerful voices at 25 years old. After Pac's death, the narrative hardened. Biggie became the villain in many people's minds, whether it made sense or not. He denied involvement, sounded shaken in interviews, said he wanted peace. But by then, the culture didn't want nuance. It wanted closure through blame. And Biggie carried that weight into Los Angeles months later, a city that never fully felt safe for him. March 9, 1997. Leaving a party. Traffic light. Shots fired. Biggie is gone at 24. Just like that. No final explanation. No resolution. Just silence. Two kings dead within 6 months, and the industry kept moving like nothing happened. 50 Cent looks at this and sees a blueprint of what not to do. He says both men died from body shots. Both moved without protection. Both trusted systems that didn't protect them. And when 50 was shot years later, he applied those lessons. Stayed armored. Stayed strategic. Stayed alive. That's why his perspective matters. He's not romanticizing the beef. He's dissecting it, stripping away the mythology to expose the mechanics underneath. And when you do that, what you see isn't hatred. It's manipulation, misunderstanding, and two men who never got the chance to sit in a room and really talk it out. By the time both men were gone, the culture had already decided what the story was supposed to be. Tupac versus Biggie. East versus West. Two legends who hated each other so much it ended in blood. It was a clean narrative. Easy to digest. Easy to sell. But 50 Cent has always said the cleanest stories are usually the most dishonest ones. And when you slow this whole thing down, when you remove the dramatic music and the myth-making, a different picture starts to form. After Pac's death, Biggie didn't celebrate. He didn't feel victorious. He didn't feel relieved. People close to him said he felt hunted, nervous, like the walls were closing in. And that's important, because if he truly hated Pac, if he truly wanted him gone, Pac's death would have ended the problem. Instead, it made everything worse. Big was now carrying a target he never asked for. In cities where he was once welcomed, he now felt unsafe. His name was attached to a murder he didn't commit, in a war he didn't start, amplified by voices that didn't care if he survived it. 50 Cent has pointed out that Biggie's final months don't look like the behavior of a man proud of a victory. They look like someone trying to escape a narrative that had grown bigger than him. He was trying to finish his album, trying to get back to New York, trying to stay alive. But once the industry turns you into a symbol, your intentions don't matter anymore. Symbols don't get protected. They get used. And this is where the role of the executives becomes impossible to ignore. Because at no point did the people with the most power say enough. No emergency sit down. No real mediation with teeth behind it. No pause on releases. No cooling off period. Instead, the machine kept rolling. Albums dropped. Interviews aired. Tension became content. And content became cash. When 50 Cent says the war was manufactured, this is what he means. Not that the emotions weren't real, but that they were exploited to the fullest. In later years, 50 didn't just speak on Pac and Big as legends. He spoke on them as case studies. He broke down how both were failed by the system around them. How neither had real security proportional to their visibility. How neither moved like men who understood how valuable and vulnerable they really were. And that's not disrespect. That's reality. Pac moved with his heart first. Big moved with trust. Both traits made them beloved. Both traits also made them exposed. When 5-0 was shot 9 times, he didn't just survive physically. He survived mentally because he had already studied these deaths. He knew fame doesn't protect you. Respect doesn't stop bullets. And loyalty doesn't mean much when money is involved. He learned that being prepared isn't paranoia. It's survival. And that lesson is why he's still here to tell this story while so many others aren't. 50 has also been careful to separate artistry from propaganda. He's praised Biggie's technical mastery openly. Flow, timing, control, humor. Big was surgical on the mic. But he's also been clear that Tupac's power came from somewhere else. Emotion, vulnerability, fearlessness. Pac said what other rappers were scared to admit they felt. And that emotional honesty created a bond with listeners that outlived him. To 50, that difference doesn't make one better than the other. It makes them complementary. Two sides of the same coin that should have been building, not battling. What really haunts this story is how close peace actually came. After Pac's death, there were real attempts to stop the bleeding. Meetings, phone calls, OGs stepping in. Even Farrakhan tried to broker unity. Later, figures from both coasts sat in rooms trying to undo years of damage. But all of it came too late. The momentum of the narrative had already claimed its victims. Biggie died weeks before one of the biggest peace meetings could truly take hold. Timing, again, playing the cruelest role. And then there's the shadow that refuses to go away. The unanswered questions. The rumors. The accusations. In recent years, 50 Cent hasn't held back when speaking on Diddy's alleged role in escalating the conflict. He's accused him of prioritizing business over human life, of fueling tension instead of calming it. And with new lawsuits, documentaries, and federal scrutiny surfacing, people are re-examining everything they once brushed off as conspiracy. Not because rumors suddenly became facts, but because power always leaves fingerprints. Neither murder has ever been officially solved. No courtroom closure. No final truth. Just theories. Street whispers. Names that surface and disappear. And that lack of resolution keeps the wound open. It allows narratives to keep mutating. It allows blame to keep shifting. And it keeps the culture stuck in a loop, replaying the same tragedy without learning the full lesson. 50's biggest point isn't about who pulled the trigger. It's about who benefited from the chaos. And when you follow the money, the answer gets uncomfortable. Labels made millions. Media outlets built empires. Careers were launched off commentary about dead men. Meanwhile, the families buried sons. Children grew up without fathers. And the culture normalized loss as entertainment. What Pac and Big shared in the beginning was real. Too many witnesses. Too many stories. Too much consistency for it to be fake. That makes the ending hurt more, not less. This wasn't destiny. It wasn't inevitable. It was a series of moments where truth got buried under perception, and no one with enough power cared to dig it back up. 50 Cent's warning is simple, but heavy. If you let other people control the narrative of your conflict, you lose control of the outcome. Pac and Big never truly got to sit down and clear the air without pressure, cameras, or consequences attached. And that absence of real conversation cost the culture two of its greatest voices. The saddest part is knowing that had they lived, this whole thing likely would have been squashed. Time has a way of softening pride. Age changes perspective. Both men were still kids in many ways, carrying adult-sized pressure. The industry didn't protect them long enough to grow out of it. It cashed in instead. And that's why, decades later, this story still matters. Not as gossip, not as nostalgia, but as a reminder of what happens when art, ego, and money collide without accountability. Because the truth is, Pac and Big didn't destroy each other. The system around them did. By the time the smoke cleared, hip-hop was left standing in a graveyard it helped build. Two of its brightest stars were gone, and the culture was forced to sit with a question nobody wanted to answer honestly. How did we let this happen? That's where 50 Cent's final point hits the hardest, because it isn't about Pac, Big, or even Diddy alone. It's about a system that rewards escalation and punishes peace. 50 has said repeatedly that if there's one thing Pac and Big never truly had, it was protection in the real sense. Not just security guards or entourages, but protection from themselves, from the narratives being forced on them, and from an industry that treated them like disposable assets. In the mid-90s, hip-hop didn't have HR departments or crisis managers. There were no mental health conversations. If you were angry, you turned it into a record. If you were paranoid, you turned it into an interview. Pain became product. And once it became profitable, nobody wanted it to stop. What makes this story even darker is how normalized the outcome became. Two young men dying violently wasn't treated as a failure of the industry. It was treated like the tragic but unavoidable price of authenticity. As if realness required blood. That mindset poisoned a generation. Young artists watched this play out and learned the wrong lesson. They thought conflict equaled credibility. That danger equaled respect. And 50 Cent has openly admitted he almost fell into the same trap before getting shot himself. When 50 survived, he didn't just change how he moved physically. He changed how he moved mentally. He stopped feeding every slight. Stopped responding emotionally to everything said about him. He learned that silence, when used strategically, isn't weakness. It's control. And that's something Pac and Big never got the chance to fully learn. They were reacting in real time, under pressure, with the whole world watching. Another uncomfortable truth 50 raises is that reconciliation doesn't make headlines. Peace doesn't trend. Imagine if Pac and Big had squashed their issues privately. No diss tracks. No dramatic interviews. No coast versus coast framing. That doesn't sell magazines. It doesn't boost radio ratings. It doesn't move units the same way conflict does. So the incentives were always stacked against healing. Even after their deaths, the industry didn't slow down. Their images were repackaged. Their stories were retold. Their pain was recycled into documentaries, anniversary specials, merch, playlists. The machine found a way to keep profiting even in their absence. And that's the part that makes 50's accusations feel less like shock value and more like indictment. Because the same people who benefited from the war benefited from the aftermath too. What often gets lost is that Pac himself showed signs of clarity before he died. In quieter moments, he spoke about feeling misunderstood, about how anger clouded judgment, about how respect mattered more to him than hatred. That's not the mindset of someone who wants endless war. That's someone drowning in emotion and struggling to stay afloat. Biggie, too, spoke about wanting peace, about not understanding how things got so far out of hand. Neither man sounded like an enemy to the other in their final reflections. They sounded tired. And that exhaustion matters. Because it tells us this wasn't a feud fueled by endless rage. It was fueled by exhaustion, misunderstanding, and pressure. Pressure to perform toughness. Pressure to represent a coast. Pressure to never appear soft. Pressure that didn't ease up until it killed them. 50 Cent has also warned that the culture hasn't fully learned from this. We still reward viral beefs. We still cheer escalation. We still turn personal trauma into entertainment. The names change, the platforms change, but the pattern stays the same. And every time an artist gets hurt or killed, we act surprised, even though the warning signs are always there. The biggest difference now is that more artists are speaking openly about stepping away, choosing peace, choosing distance. And that shift, whether people admit it or not, is built on the graves of Pac and Big. Their deaths became the cautionary tale that finally forced some self-reflection. Not enough, but some. When you strip away the mythology, what remains is painfully human. Two young men met, connected, and believed in each other. Fear and betrayal broke that bond. Powerful people exploited the fallout. And nobody pressed pause long enough to save them. That's not a story of hatred. That's a story of loss. So when people ask, did Biggie really hate Tupac? 50 Cent's answer is clear. Hate is loud and direct. What existed here was something more complicated and more tragic. Hurt, confusion, ego, and a system that saw those emotions as fuel. Hip-hop lost more than 2 rappers. It lost a chance at a different future. A future where competition didn't have to mean destruction. Where disagreement didn't have to turn deadly. That opportunity died with them. And every generation after has been trying, in its own flawed way, to recover it. The truth is uncomfortable because it doesn't give us a villain we can easily point to and walk away. It forces us to look at the culture, the industry, and ourselves as fans. Because as long as conflict sells better than healing, this story will keep repeating with different names. Pac and Big didn't need to die for hip-hop to grow. But their deaths became the lesson the culture finally listened to. And 50 Cent, having survived his own brush with death, is reminding us that the lesson only matters if we apply it. Otherwise, it's just another story we tell while the cycle continues. So now that you've heard the full story, the question isn't just about Tupac and Biggie anymore. It's about how you see hip-hop history. Were we really watching 2 men who hated each other? Or were we watching 2 brothers get torn apart by misunderstanding, ego, and an industry that profits off chaos? That answer matters, because it changes how we judge not just the past, but what's happening right now in the culture. Drop your real thoughts in the comments. No bias. No sides. Just truth. Did the industry manufacture this war, Or do you still believe it was inevitable? And if Pac and Big had lived long enough to sit down, face to face, no cameras, no labels, no pressure, do you think this story would have ended differently? If this breakdown made you rethink what you thought you knew, make sure you're locked in. There are too many stories in hip-hop that never get told the right way, and we're here to peel back the layers, not repeat the same headlines. Hit that subscribe button, tap the notification bell, and stay connected so you don't miss what's coming next. And if you want to keep digging deeper, click on the next video on your screen. Because this wasn't the only time the industry turned pain into profit, and the next story might shock you even more.